In the Outer Rim territories, far from the gleaming spires of the core worlds, lies a planet where the very sand remembers darkness. A world where stone monuments stand as eternal sentinels over the tombs of beings who sought power beyond mortal comprehension. This is Korriban, the ancient birthplace of the Sith, a planet whose history stretches back tens of thousands of years into the shadows of galactic prehistory. To understand the Sith, one must first understand their homeworld. To understand their homeworld, one must journey back through millennia, past the rise and fall of empires, past the wars that scarred the galaxy, back to a time when the Force itself seemed young and the galaxy held secrets yet undiscovered. This is the entire history of Korriban, the ancient world. 30,000 years before the Battle of Yavin, before the Galactic Republic drew its first breath, before even the earliest hyperspace explorers charted the known galaxy, Korriban was already ancient. The planet sits in the Horus-Set system of the Outer Rim, a desolate sphere of red sand and jagged mountains. Its diameter spans approximately 16,890 kilometers, large enough to maintain a breathable atmosphere, but inhospitable enough that life itself became a struggle for dominance. The landscape of Korriban is harsh and unforgiving. Vast deserts of crimson sand stretch endlessly beneath skies that range from blood red at dawn to deep orange at dusk. The sand itself tells a story composed of minerals rich in iron that gave the planet its distinctive coloration. Dried riverbeds carve through the terrain like scars, evidence of a time when water once flowed across this world. Those days belong to an era so distant that no records survived to document them. Mountains rise from the desert floor in sharp angular formations. These peaks are not the smooth, weathered slopes found on gentler worlds. Instead, they thrust upward like broken teeth, their surfaces marked by deep canyons and sheer cliffs. Wind carved passages through these mountains over countless millennia, creating natural corridors and hidden valleys that would later serve purposes their ancient shapers could never have imagined. The climate of Korriban tends toward hot and dry. Though cold winds sweep down from the mountains during the night, creating dramatic temperature shifts that crack stone and erode even the hardest materials. This constant cycle of heat and cold shaped the planet's geography, creating an environment where only the strong could survive. The atmosphere, while breathable, carries a constant taste of dust and minerals, a reminder that this world offers no comfort to those who walk upon it. Yet, life found a way. Despite the harsh conditions, flora and fauna adapted to exist in this unforgiving realm. Desert plants with deep roots tapped into underground water sources, their thick, waxy surfaces minimizing moisture loss. Creatures evolved to hunt during the cooler hours, developing heightened senses to track prey across the barren wastes. The ecosystem of Korriban was sparse but resilient, a network of predators and prey locked in an eternal dance of survival. And in this crucible, a species emerged that would change galactic history forever. The Sith species. The original inhabitants of Korriban were not human. They were not even similar to most humanoid species known to modern galactic civilization. They were the Sith, a unique race that evolved on this harsh world, shaped by its environment and by something else entirely. Something that flowed through the planet itself like blood through veins. The Sith species were striking in appearance. Their skin ranged in color from deep crimson to blood red, though variations existed. Some individuals displayed skin in shades of orange or even darker, almost purple hues. As they aged, their skin often deepened in color, moving from bright red toward darker crimson tones. A few rare individuals were born with skin colors that deviated dramatically from the norm, including shades of charcoal black or pale pink. Their eyes glowed with an inner fire. Most Sith possessed eyes in shades of orange, yellow, or burning red, colors that seemed to reflect the harsh sunlight of their homeworld. These eyes could see well in low light conditions, an adaptation that served them well during hunts in the cooler evening hours or in the deep shadows of mountain caves. Many Sith bore natural bone protrusions from their faces and heads. These spurs varied in size and placement, giving each individual a distinctive appearance. Some scholars would later theorize these served as indicators of genetic lineage or social status, though the truth remained lost to prehistory. Facial tendrils were common among certain bloodlines, muscular appendages that some researchers believed served as additional sensory organs. But the most remarkable aspect of the Sith species was not their physical appearance. It was their connection to an energy field that permeated the galaxy, an ancient power that sentient beings would eventually come to call the Force. The Sith people possessed an instinctive, natural connection to what later generations would term the dark side of this Force. They did not understand it as modern Force users would. To them it was simply power, a tool that flowed through them as naturally as breath. This connection manifested in different ways among the Sith. Some could manipulate the emotions of others through sheer presence. Others developed what might be called prescience, glimpses of potential futures that gave them advantage in combat or politics. Still others learned to channel their connection into physical acts, moving objects with thought or enhancing their own strength beyond natural limits. The Sith did not have formal training in these abilities during their earliest days. These powers emerged instinctively, passed down through bloodlines and refined through generations of trial and error. The Sith species organized themselves into tribal societies, each clan claiming territory in different regions of Korriban. Life on their harsh homeworld created a culture where strength determined survival. The weak did not simply fail, they perished, eliminated by the environment, by predators, or by stronger members of their own species. This harsh natural selection created a people who valued power above all else, who saw conflict not as something to be avoided, but as the fundamental mechanism through which individuals and societies improved. Warfare was common among the early Sith tribes. Disputes over hunting grounds, water sources, or perceived insults erupted into violent confrontations. These were not the organized military campaigns of later civilizations, but raw, brutal conflicts where warriors fought with primitive weapons enhanced by their connection to the Force. Stone blades held edges sharper than they should. Spears flew farther than mere muscle could throw them. Warriors moved with speed that defied explanation, their bodies responding to instincts amplified by energies they could not name. The Sith developed a caste system that reflected their values. At the top stood the warriors, the Massassi, massive and powerful individuals who won their status through combat prowess. These giants among their people served as the military elite, the champions who determined tribal conflicts and led raids against rival clans. Their physical strength combined with Force abilities made them nearly unstoppable in personal combat. Below the warriors stood the Zuggurat, craftsmen and builders who created weapons, constructed shelters, and developed the technologies that allowed Sith society to progress beyond mere subsistence. Though they held less prestige than warriors, the Zuggurat were essential to survival. They learned to work metal, to forge blades that could withstand the punishment of combat, to create tools that made life marginally less brutal. The Kisai occupied a unique position in Sith society. These were the priests, individuals whose connection to the Force manifested more strongly in mystical directions. The Kisai studied the power that flowed through them, developing rituals and practices that would eventually evolve into Sith sorcery. They served as spiritual leaders, advisors to tribal chieftains, keepers of knowledge passed down through oral traditions. The Kisai were the first to recognize that their connection to power was not random, that it could be studied, understood, and enhanced through deliberate practice. At the bottom of Sith society existed slaves, individuals from conquered tribes or those born to servitude. The Sith saw no moral issue with slavery. In their worldview, the strong naturally dominated the weak. Those who could not defend themselves deserved their fate. Slaves performed menial labor, freeing warriors and craftsmen to focus on tasks the Sith deemed more important. This social structure remained remarkably stable for thousands of years. Tribes rose and fell, boundaries shifted as stronger clans conquered weaker ones, but the fundamental organization of Sith society persisted. The planet itself seeming to reinforce this stability, its harsh conditions, ensuring that only proven systems of social organization survived. The Valley of Sleeping Kings. In the northeastern region of Korriban's primary continent, a geological feature existed that would shape the planet's destiny for millennia to come. A massive canyon carved through mountains of red stone, its walls smoothed by countless centuries of wind erosion. This valley stretched for kilometers, a natural corridor sheltered from the worst of the desert winds, a place where the very stone seemed to whisper secrets. The Sith recognized something special about this valley. Perhaps they sensed the concentration of Force energy that gathered there, pooling in the stone like water in a depression. Perhaps they simply recognized the strategic value of a sheltered location close to underground water sources. Whatever the reason, this valley became sacred to the Sith people. They began to bury their dead there. Not all dead, of course. Common warriors and laborers were cremated or left for scavengers according to tribal custom. But great chieftains, legendary Massassi warriors who had conquered many enemies, powerful Kisai whose sorcery had shaped the fate of clans, these individuals were deemed worthy of a different fate. The Sith began carving tombs directly into the valley walls. These early tombs were crude by later standards. Chambers were excavated into the soft stone using tools and force abilities to hollow out spaces large enough to contain a body and some grave goods. The Sith believed that the warrior would need weapons in whatever realm awaited beyond death. They placed swords and spears beside corpses, along with personal possessions and sometimes sacrifices, slaves or captured enemies killed to serve the deceased in the afterlife. Over generations, the practice evolved. The tombs grew larger and more elaborate. The Sith learned to stabilize the excavated chambers, preventing collapse. They developed techniques for creating multiple chambers within a single tomb complex, allowing for extensive storage of grave goods and the inclusion of sacrificed attendants. The valley walls began to transform. Where once smooth stone had stood, massive carved facades appeared. The Sith sculpted the faces of their honored dead directly into the valley walls, creating portraits that stared out across the sands with eternal vigilance. These were not realistic depictions, but idealized representations. Warriors shown at the peak of their power, frozen forever in stone. Some tombs received additional embellishments. Statues were carved to stand guard at entrances. The Sith developed their own written language, angular characters cut into stone, marking tombs with the names and deeds of those interred within. These inscriptions were the closest thing the Sith had to written history during this period. Every major tomb told a story in stone and text, a record of conquest and power that served to inspire future generations. The valley earned a name, the Valley of the Sleeping Kings. The Sith believed their greatest warriors did not truly die, but instead entered a state of eternal slumber, waiting for a time when they might be called upon again. This belief was not entirely superstition. The Sith recognized that something of individuals persisted after death. That consciousness could sometimes linger in places touched deeply by the Force. They understood this only dimly, lacking the framework to articulate it clearly. But they knew their dead were not entirely gone. As centuries passed, the Valley of the Sleeping Kings became the primary burial ground for Sith royalty across multiple tribes. A chieftain who wished to demonstrate his power and status ensured that his tomb in the valley surpassed those of his predecessors. This competition drove the creation of increasingly impressive monuments. Simple carved chambers gave way to vast complexes with multiple levels, hidden passages, treasure rooms filled with plundered wealth. The valley became more than a cemetery. It evolved into a pilgrimage site, a place where young warriors came to seek inspiration from the honored dead. Kisai priests performed rituals among the tombs, attempting to commune with the spirits of ancient heroes, seeking their wisdom and blessing. Some claimed success, reporting visions and prophetic dreams after spending nights in the valley. Whether these experiences stemmed from genuine contact with lingering consciousness or merely from the potent Force energy saturating the location remained a matter of interpretation. The Valley of the Sleeping Kings grew more powerful with each new addition. Every death, every burial, every ritual performed among the tombs added to the concentration of dark side energy pooled there. The stone absorbed the presence of thousands of souls who had dedicated their lives to the pursuit of power through conflict and domination. The valley itself became a nexus, a place where the barrier between life and death grew thin, where the Force manifested with unusual intensity. This would matter tremendously in the ages to come, but for now, the valley remained what the Sith intended, a monument to their values, a testament to the primacy of strength, a reminder that glory and power could transcend even death itself. The rise of the Sithari. 28,000 years before the Battle of Yavin, a child was born who would unite the fractured tribes of Korriban under a single banner. His name has echoed through history, spoken with reverence by Sith for millennia after his death, Otis. From birth, Otis was different. His skin was not the typical red of his people, but a deep charcoal color, black as the spaces between stars. This unusual pigmentation marked him as special in Sith culture, where deviation from the norm often indicated power. The priests declared him chosen by the forces they sensed flowing through the world, destined for greatness beyond that of common warriors. Otis grew larger than typical Sith, a massive figure even among a people known for producing powerful warriors. His intelligence exceeded the norm as well. While many Sith were cunning and capable within the context of their tribal warfare, Otis demonstrated a capacity for strategic thinking that surpassed his contemporaries. He saw patterns others missed, understood cause and effect in ways that allowed him to plan campaigns rather than simply react to immediate threats. Most significantly, Otis possessed an extraordinary connection to the Force. He manifested abilities far beyond what even the most powerful Kisai could achieve. Otis learned to manipulate the energy that flowed through him, not through years of study and practice, but through instinct, as though he had been born knowing secrets that others spent lifetimes pursuing. He encased himself in armor forged through processes that combined metallurgy with Force techniques. This ebon armor became iconic, a suit of spiked black metal that made Otis appear even larger and more intimidating. The armor was not merely protective, it was psychological warfare, transforming Otis into a walking symbol of dominance and power. Otis wielded a massive battle axe, crafted through alchemical processes that the Sith of his era barely understood. The weapon was forged in rituals that infused the metal with Force energy, creating a blade that held an edge no natural weapon could match. This axe became the symbol of Otis's authority, a tool of conquest that he used to devastating effect. Around 28,000 years before Yavin, Otis began his campaign of unification. He was not content to rule a single tribe. His vision encompassed all of Korriban, a planet united under his command. One by one, he challenged the chieftains of rival tribes. Some battles were personal duels where Otis proved his superiority in single combat. Others were full military campaigns where he led his followers against those who refused to submit. The wars were brutal. Entire tribes were wiped out when they resisted too fiercely. Otis showed no mercy to those who defied him, understanding that hesitation would be seen as weakness. He crushed opposition with overwhelming force, then offered survivors a choice: join him or perish. Most chose to join. Those who refused ceased to exist. These wars of unification lasted for years, possibly decades. The scattered historical records that survive this period paint a picture of constant conflict, of a warrior who seemed unstoppable, who won every battle through a combination of personal power, tactical brilliance, and sheer ruthlessness. Otis did not simply defeat his enemies, he broke them so thoroughly that thoughts of future rebellion became impossible. When the last opposing chieftain fell, Otis stood as the undisputed ruler of Korriban. The Sith hailed him as Sith Ari, a title that translates loosely as Overlord or Perfect Being. It was a designation reserved for individuals who embodied everything the Sith valued: strength, intelligence, mastery of their power, and the will to dominate all opposition. Otis established his reign as king with the understanding that unity through force was the only stability his people understood. He created a system of governance that mirrored Sith values. The strongest warriors became his generals and administrators, given authority over conquered territories in his name. The Kisai priests served as advisors, their mystical insights helping aid us navigate the spiritual dimensions of Sith culture. The system was feudal in structure but brutal in implementation. Loyalty was rewarded with power and status. Betrayal met swift and terrible punishment. Under Otis, Sith civilization flourished in ways it never had before. United tribes could undertake projects impossible for fragmented clans. Construction increased, with new temples and fortifications rising across Korriban. The Zuggurat craftsmen developed new technologies, advancing metallurgy and engineering. Trade networks connected distant regions, allowing specialization and the exchange of goods that improved quality of life even in this harsh world. Otis himself continued to grow in power. He delved deeper into understanding the Force, developing techniques that would form the foundation of what later generations would call Sith sorcery. He learned to manipulate life itself, an art that terrified even his own priests. Experiments conducted in hidden chambers produced monstrosities, creatures warped by dark side energy into forms nature never intended. These beasts served as guardians and weapons, living evidence of Adas's mastery over creation itself. The Sith people came to view Otis as more than merely a king. He became almost a god in their eyes, a being whose power and longevity seemed to transcend mortal limits. This was not entirely worship born from simple superstition. Otis lived far longer than normal Sith, his connection to the Force sustaining him well beyond typical lifespans. He ruled for 300 years, an almost unthinkable reign for a people who typically lived perhaps a third that long, even in the best circumstances. During these centuries, Otis shaped Korriban into a true civilization. The Valley of the Sleeping Kings received particular attention. New tombs were carved on a scale dwarfing previous construction. Massive statues were erected, monuments to Adas himself and to the concept of Sith dominance. The valley became not just a burial ground, but the spiritual heart of Sith culture, a place where warriors came to contemplate mortality and power, where priests performed their most sacred rituals. The period of Adas's reign became known as the Reign of the Axe. It was a golden age of sorts for the Sith, a time when their civilization reached heights it had never achieved in its fractious past. But golden ages, no matter how powerful the monarch who creates them, cannot last forever. The galaxy is too large, too filled with powers that care nothing for the ambitions of any single species or individual. And one of those powers was about to arrive on Korriban, the Infinite Empire. 27,700 years before the Battle of Yavin, when King Adus was approximately 300 years old, ships descended from the sky. They were unlike anything the Sith had ever seen, vessels powered by technologies that seemed to defy understanding. These were not the crude rockets that the Sith had begun developing in their own tentative explorations of flight. These were true starships, capable of traveling between worlds, products of a civilization that had mastered the galaxy when the Sith was still painting on cave walls. The ship belonged to the Rakata, a species native to a planet called Lehon. The Rakata had built something unprecedented in galactic history. The Infinite Empire, a civilization spanning hundreds of worlds, held together by technologies that drew power directly from the Force itself. The Rakata were Force-sensitive as a species, though their connection manifested primarily through the dark side. They had weaponized this connection, creating machines and vessels powered by Force energy, achieving levels of technology that would not be matched again for thousands of years. But the Rakata had a problem. Their empire was built on slavery. They conquered primitive worlds, subjugating populations to serve as labor forces for their massive construction projects. They had strip-mined dozens of planets, leaving them barren husks. They had transplanted entire populations to serve their purposes. They were, in every sense, a predatory civilization that saw the galaxy as resources to be exploited. And now they had come to Korriban. The Rakata initially approached with apparent friendliness. They presented themselves as benefactors, beings of advanced knowledge who wished to uplift the primitive Sith. Their first contact was with King Adus himself. The Rakata recognized power when they encountered it, and Adus radiated power like a furnace radiates heat. They saw an opportunity to gain a strong ally or servant depending on how matters developed. The Rakata taught Adus about their technology. More specifically, they taught him about holocrons, devices capable of storing information and consciousness in crystalline matrices. This was revolutionary for the Sith, who had relied on oral tradition and primitive written records. A holocron could preserve knowledge indefinitely, could serve as an interactive teacher for future generations. The implications were staggering. Adus created his own holocron, one of the first such devices to be made by a non-Rakatan. The process required months of work, combining his connection to the Force with techniques the Rakata provided. When completed, the holocron contained his essence, a fragment of consciousness that could interact with those who accessed the device. It recorded his knowledge, his philosophy, his understanding of Sith sorcery. This holocron would survive for thousands of years, passing from hand to hand, teaching future generations long after Adus himself had died. But the Rakata's true purpose soon became apparent. They were not on Korriban to uplift the Sith. They were suiting the planet as a potential addition to their empire. They evaluated the Sith as a potential slave race, beings whose natural connection to the Force could be harnessed for Rakatan purposes. The Sith was strong, durable, capable of surviving in harsh conditions. They would make excellent servants. The Rakata began their conquest attempt subtly, trying to establish control through manipulation rather than immediate military force. They provided more gifts, more technology, trying to make the Sith dependent on Rakatan knowledge. They established outposts in remote regions, bringing in more equipment and personnel. They believed they could slowly tighten their grip on Korriban until resistance became impossible. King Adas saw through their deception. His centuries of ruling had taught him to recognize manipulation, to understand when apparent friendship masked hostile intent. Perhaps his Force sensitivity allowed him to sense the darkness in Rakatan hearts. Darkness that even exceeded the Sith's capacity for cruelty. Whatever the source of his insight, Adas realized the Rakata intended to enslave his people. He would not allow it. Adas began preparing for war. He gathered his greatest warriors, the most powerful Massassi of his reign. He consulted with Kisai priests about ways to counter Rakatan technology with Sith sorcery. He personally trained cadres of elite fighters, teaching them techniques for combating technologically superior opponents. The Sith had always relied on brutal directness in warfare, but Adas understood this situation required something more. When the Rakata finally revealed their true intentions and demanded Sith submission, Adas responded with his battle axe. The war that followed was unlike anything in Sith history. For the first time, they faced enemies who did not share their connection to Korriban, who came from the sky in ships that seemed invincible, who wielded weapons the Sith barely comprehended. The Rakata had Force-powered disruptors, blasters that could vaporize flesh, personal shields that deflected primitive Sith weapons. They had numbers, reinforcements from across their empire, but they had never faced anyone like King Adas. The battles were concentrated in the plains surrounding the Valley of the Sleeping Kings. Rakatan ships landed, disgorging troops armed with their superior weapons. The Sith met them with fury and dark side energy. Adas himself led from the front, his massive axe cleaving through Rakatan warriors. His presence inspired his followers, turning the tide of battles that should have been Rakatan victories. The Sith learned to counter Rakatan technology through guerrilla tactics and Force abilities. They couldn't match Rakatan firepower in open battle, but they could ambush isolated units, strike at supply lines, use their knowledge of Korriban's terrain to devastating advantage. Adas developed techniques for disrupting Rakatan Force-powered equipment, turning their greatest advantage against them. The war lasted months, possibly years. Both sides paid terrible costs. Thousands of Sith warriors fell to Rakatan weapons. Entire regions of Korriban became graveyards, littered with the debris of shattered civilizations. But slowly, inexorably, the tide turned against the invaders. The Sith captured Rakatan ships intact, a tremendous achievement that gave them access to star travel for the first time. Adas himself led the final assault on the primary Rakatan base. The battle was catastrophic. Force energy and technological weaponry clashed in ways that scarred the land. Buildings collapsed, The very stone of Korriban cracked under the pressure of unleashed power. In the chaos of this final battle, King Adas fell. The historical record does not preserve exactly how he died. Some accounts claim a Rakatan weapon struck him down. Others suggest he overextended himself, pushing his force abilities beyond even his tremendous limits. Some whisper that he was betrayed, though by whom and why remains unknown. Whatever the truth, the immortal king, the Sithari who had ruled for 3 centuries, died defending his people from enslavement. But his death came as victory was achieved. The Rakata, already reeling from Sith ferocity, broke when news spread of Adas's fall. They had believed the Sith would collapse without their godlike leader. Instead, his death enraged the Sith beyond reason. The final Rakatan positions were overrun in waves of berserk warriors who cared nothing for their own survival. The surviving Rakata fled Korriban in whatever ships remained operational, abandoning their equipment and their dead. The Sith had won, but they had lost their king. The fracturing King Adas's death created an immediate crisis. For 300 years, the Sith had been united under one unquestioned ruler. The force of his personality and power had held together tribes that would naturally have fallen to warring among themselves. With Adas gone, that unifying force vanished overnight. The Sith gave Adas a burial befitting his status. His tomb was carved into the most prominent position in the Valley of the Sleeping Kings, a massive complex that dwarfed all previous construction. The entrance was marked with colossal statues of Adas himself, eternally watchful. Inside, multiple chambers held treasures beyond counting, weapons accumulated over his long reign, artifacts of power, and sacrifices including dozens of slaves and captured Rakata killed to serve him in the afterlife. His holocron was not placed in the tomb. Instead, it was granted to his most trusted advisors, who understood that such knowledge needed to remain accessible to the living. This holocron would prove influential in shaping future generations of Sith thought. With this entombed, the Sith faced the question of succession. Under Adas, this issue had never arisen. He had outlived potential heirs and usurpers alike. Now, with no clear system in place, multiple claimants emerged. Powerful warlords commanded the loyalty of different regions. Ambitious individuals saw opportunity in the chaos. The fragile unity Adas had forged began to crack. Within years, Korriban descended into civil war once again. Not the wars of tribal competition that had preceded Adas, but conflicts between organized factions, each believing they represented the true heir to his legacy. These wars were more destructive than earlier conflicts precisely because the combatants were more organized, better armed with technologies scavenged from the Rakata, more skilled in force techniques Adas had taught. Many claimed the title of Sithari. During this period, warlords declared themselves the rightful successors, the next perfect being destined to unite the Sith. But none possessed Adas's combination of power, intelligence, and longevity. Claimants rose and fell with disturbing rapidity. Some held power for years before being overthrown. Others barely lasted months. The civil wars drove refugees to seek new worlds. The Sith now possessed captured Rakatan ships, crewed by the standards of the Infinite Empire but functional enough for basic space travel. Some Sith fled Korriban entirely, searching for worlds where they might establish their own kingdoms. Free from the constant warfare, they colonized the nearby planet Ziost, a world with a more temperate climate that could support larger populations. Other groups traveled further, establishing outposts on worlds including Malachor Fuv and Tund. Ziost eventually became the primary capital for many Sith factions. Its more hospitable environment allowed for the development of larger cities, more sophisticated infrastructure, greater population density. The political center of Sith civilization gradually shifted away from Korriban, though the homeworld retained tremendous spiritual significance. The Valley of the Sleeping Kings remained the most sacred site in the Sith culture, the place where even rival factions agreed great leaders should be buried. The civil wars on Korriban itself continued for centuries. The planet became a battlefield where different Sith factions tested themselves, where young warriors went to prove their worth in the ultimate crucible. The population declined as death and emigration took their toll. Entire regions became depopulated, returning to the desert wilderness. But the Valley of the Sleeping Kings continued to grow. Even during periods of intense warfare, combatants generally avoided damaging the sacred tombs. New monuments were added as fallen warlords and champions earned burial among the honored dead. The valley became a massive necropolis, a city of the dead that sprawled for kilometers, its population of eternal sleepers far exceeding the number of living Sith on the planet. The Sith culture evolved during this period of fracture. The constant warfare refined their philosophy of strength. They developed more sophisticated understandings of the Force, building on foundations Otis had established. The Kisai priests compiled knowledge, creating what might be called the first Sith archives, collections of scrolls and tablets describing rituals, techniques, and philosophies. These archives survive in hidden locations, preserved by priests who understood that knowledge itself was power. Out of the chaos, occasionally powerful leaders emerged who could unite significant portions of the Sith. These individuals held power for a time, creating brief periods of relative stability before the cycle of war resumed. None achieved the status of Adas, but some left legacies that influenced future generations. The Sith remained isolated during most of this period. They explored nearby star systems, establishing small colonies, but they did not encounter other spacefaring civilizations. The Infinite Empire had collapsed, torn apart by internal conflicts and slave rebellions, leaving a power vacuum across much of the galaxy. The Galactic Republic had not yet formed. The Jedi Order existed, but had not reached the Sith systems in this era. This isolation allowed Sith culture to develop without external influence. Their society, their philosophy, their approach to the Force all evolved in directions shaped purely by their own values and experiences. They worshipped power, celebrated strength, saw conflict as the mechanism through which individuals and civilizations improved. These beliefs weren't imposed from outside, but emerged organically from their nature and history. And so Korriban remained simultaneously a dead world and the beating heart of Sith civilization. Its population numbered in the thousands rather than millions, concentrated primarily around the Valley of the Sleeping Kings, where the most important temples and training facilities stood. The planet was scarred by war, dotted with ruins of cities that had fallen in forgotten conflicts. But it endured, as it always had, harsh and unforgiving, a world that created Sith through the simple expedient of killing anyone who was not strong enough to survive. The age of isolation was drawing to a close, though the Sith did not yet know it. Far away, in regions of space they had never explored, other powers were rising. The Galactic Republic had formed, a coalition of worlds that believed in cooperation, diplomacy, and mutual defense. The Jedi Order had grown, spreading their philosophy of peace and their light-sided approach to the Force. And in approximately 6,900 years before the Battle of Yavin, these two civilizations would collide in ways that would reshape both forever. But that collision required a catalyst, a bridge between the light and the dark. That bridge would be forged in blood and betrayal, created by Jedi who sought power their order forbade, who would be cast out and forced to find refuge among a people who worshiped the very darkness the Jedi rejected. The stage was set. The Sith waited unknowing in their ancient tombs and hidden temples. The dark side of the Force gathered strength in the Valley of the Dark Lords, patient and eternal, ready for the moment when new vessels would arrive to channel its power. That moment was approaching, and when it came, Korriban would transform from the homeworld of an isolated species into the birthplace of a philosophy that would threaten the galaxy for millennia to come. The fallen Jedi. 7,000 years before the Battle of Yavin, the Galactic Republic stood at a crucial juncture in its history. The Jedi Order served as guardians of peace and justice, wielding the Force in service of the light side, dedicating themselves to protecting sentient beings across thousands of worlds. But within the Order, not all agreed with its teachings. A faction of Jedi grew frustrated with the limitations imposed by the Council. They wanted to explore aspects of the Force that the Order forbade. They hungered for knowledge that their masters refused to share. They chafed under restrictions they viewed as arbitrary and limiting. These Jedi believed that true understanding of the Force required studying all its aspects, not just the narrow path the Order prescribed. Their studies led them into forbidden territory. They experimented with Sith alchemy, techniques for manipulating life that horrified the mainstream Jedi. They investigated genetic modifications, altering living beings to serve specific purposes. They explored emotions the Jedi traditionally suppressed, using passion and anger to fuel their connection to the Force. They created creatures through dark side rituals, monsters born from their experiments. The Jedi Council moved against them. This was not a simple matter of different philosophical perspectives that could be resolved through debate. These rogue Jedi had crossed lines the Order considered absolute. They had delved into practices that led inevitably toward the dark side, endangering themselves and potentially the entire galaxy. What followed became known as the Second Great Schism, or the 100-Year Darkness. The conflict erupted into open warfare, raging across multiple star systems for a century. The rogue Jedi, now fallen to the dark side, commanded armies of their followers and the monsters they had created. They wielded powers the mainstream Jedi found disturbing, drawing on anger and hatred to fuel abilities the Order had long suppressed. But numbers told. The mainstream Jedi Order commanded greater resources, fielded more warriors, enjoyed support from the Republic. The dark side practitioners fought with individual power and fearsome abilities, but they could not match the coordinated efforts of thousands of Jedi working in concert. Battle by battle, system by system, the rogue Jedi were pushed back. The final confrontation came at the Battle of Korriban, around 6,900 years before Yavin. There, the combined forces of the Jedi Order defeated the last major army of fallen Jedi and their followers. The defeat was total. The dark side practitioners had no reserves to call upon, no hidden strongholds to retreat toward. They were finished. The Jedi Council faced a question: what to do with the survivors? Execution would have been simpler, cleaner, ensuring these dangerous individuals could never again threaten the peace. But the Jedi Order still held to its principles, even when confronting those who had betrayed them. They chose mercy, though their mercy took a harsh form. The fallen Jedi were stripped of their possessions, their weapons, their artifacts of dark power, their ships all confiscated. They were loaded onto unarmed vessels with minimal supplies and provisions. Then they were exiled from Republic space, cast out into the unknown regions with orders never to return. The Jedi believed this punishment served justice while avoiding the moral complications of mass execution. They believed the exiles would struggle to survive in the harsh unknowns beyond civilized space, would eventually die or fade into obscurity. They could not have been more wrong. Arrival on Korriban. The exiles wandered for weeks. Their unarmed ships drifted through hyperspace, seeking any habitable world where they might establish a new life. Food supplies dwindled, water recyclers strained under constant use. The exiles, numbering perhaps a few hundred, began to wonder if the Jedi's mercy was actually a death sentence, if they would starve in the void between stars. Then their sensors detected a planet. Scans showed it was habitable with breathable atmosphere and evidence of civilization. The exiles altered course, driven by desperation as much as hope. Their ships dropped out of hyperspace in the Horusset system, and there, hanging in the darkness of space, was a red planet wreathed in dust storms. Korriban! The exiles landed in the Valley of the Sleeping Kings. Imagine their first moments on that ancient world, the red sand beneath their feet, the massive tomb facades staring down at them from valley walls, the palpable sense of power that permeated the air, dark side energy so concentrated they could taste it. After the empty void of space, after weeks of uncertainty, they had found something extraordinary. The native Sith emerged to investigate these strange visitors. The exiles must have seemed impossibly alien to them. Humans, primarily, along with other species, entirely unknown to Korriban. Strangers who dropped from the sky in metal ships, who wore strange clothes and carried unfamiliar weapons. But when the exiles demonstrated their powers, moving objects with thought, channeling energy through their bodies, wielding weapons that glowed with plasma fire, the Sith response was immediate and unambiguous. They fell to their knees in worship. The Sith had always understood that power existed beyond the purely physical. Their Kisai priests wielded abilities they attributed to their connection with mystical forces. But the exiles demonstrated powers beyond anything the native Sith had achieved. Their control was refined, their techniques sophisticated, their understanding theoretical and tested. They were gods, or so the Sith believed, divine beings come from the stars to rule over them. The exiles seized this opportunity. They had been cast out by one civilization. Now they would build another. They would take these primitive but powerful beings and forge them into something new. They would create an empire built on principles the Jedi rejected, where strength mattered more than compassion, where power determined justice, where the dark side of the Force was not shameful, but celebrated. The transformation began immediately. The exiles spread across the Sith population, each taking control of different tribes and regions. They taught the Sith new techniques for channeling the Force. They shared technologies the native population had never imagined. They demonstrated organizational principles that allowed for larger, more effective social structures. The exiles provided what the Sith had always lacked: direction and sophisticated knowledge. And in return, the Sith gave the exiles something equally valuable: acceptance. These fallen Jedi had been rejected by their own people, cast out as failures and monsters. But here, on this harsh world among a species that valued the very qualities the Jedi condemned, they found a home. They found people who revered them, who wanted to learn from them, who shared their approach to power. The exile began interbreeding with the native Sith population. This was not merely a matter of personal relationships, though those certainly occurred. It was a deliberate strategy to merge the two populations into something new. The exiles possessed refined knowledge and techniques. The Sith had raw power and natural dark side connection. Combined, these strengths would create something greater than either group alone could achieve. The genetic blending produced remarkable offspring. Children inherited the physical characteristics of their Sith parentage: the red skin, the glowing eyes, the facial features, while also possessing the more refined Force sensitivity of their exile parents. These hybrid children demonstrated abilities that surpassed either parent, combining natural power with trained technique. Over generations, the distinction between the exiles and the native Sith blurred. The term Sith came to refer not to the original species, but to anyone who followed the philosophy the exiles brought. Human descendants of the original exiles were Sith. Pureblood descendants of the native species were Sith. The hybrids who carried genes from both groups were Sith. The species designation transformed into a cultural and philosophical identifier. Among the exiles who settled on Korriban, several names would echo through history. Ajunta Pall stood foremost among them. He had been a Jedi master before his fall, a warrior of tremendous strength and a scholar of forbidden knowledge. It was Ajunta Pall who first learned to create and shape life through the Force, the art that led to his expulsion from the Order. Now, on Korriban, he refined those techniques, creating beasts and monsters that would serve the Sith for generations. Karness Moore brought expertise in Sith alchemy that made even Paul's achievements seem limited. Sorza Sin possessed scholarly instincts that drove her to document everything, creating the first written records of Sith philosophy and technique. Remulus Draper, Tulak Hord's future predecessor in conquest, Zosan, who would become legendary for her combat prowess. All these and more scattered across Korriban, taking control of different regions, teaching their knowledge to eager students. The strongest among them, Ajunta Pall, declared himself the first Dark Lord of the Sith. He established supremacy over his fellow exiles through combat and force of will, proving his right to rule according to principles the Sith understood instinctively. Pall adopted the ancient Valley of the Sleeping Kings as the center of this new civilization, recognizing the concentration of power there, understanding that building on existing foundations would prove more effective than starting fresh. Under Pall's leadership, Sith civilization entered a new phase. The Valley of the Sleeping Kings received new construction on a scale that dwarfed anything the native Sith had achieved. Massive temples rose, structures designed to channel and amplify dark side energy. The valley walls were carved with new monuments, statues of the Dark Lord and his most powerful followers towering over the ancient tombs of native kings. The valley received a new name, one that reflected its transformed purpose: the Valley of the Dark Lords. No longer merely a burial ground for tribal chieftains, it became the heart of an empire, a place where Dark Lords trained apprentices, where secrets of the dark side were taught openly, where power accumulated like storms gathering on the horizon. The first Sith Empire. The establishment of Ajunta Pall as Dark Lord marked the foundation of what historians would later call the first Sith Empire. This was not an empire in the traditional republic sense, with democratic institutions and representative government. This was a society built on the principle that power justified rule, where the strong commanded and the weak obeyed or perished. Korriban served as the spiritual capital, but the practical seat of government gradually shifted to Ziost. The more hospitable world offered advantages for administration, supporting larger populations and more extensive infrastructure. But every significant ritual, every important ceremony, every matter of supreme importance brought the Sith back to Korriban, back to the Valley of the Dark Lords, where the tombs of ancient kings, watched silently in the Sith Empire, expanded rapidly under the Dark Lords. They possessed superior technology, inherited from the exiles, ships capable of hyperspace travel, weapons far beyond what primitive civilizations could match. They encountered planets inhabited by species who had never faced Force users, who fell easily before Sith power. World after world submitted to conquest or was reduced to ruin. Slavery became central to the Sith economy. Conquered populations were transported to Sith worlds to labor in mines, construct monuments, serve in whatever capacity their masters desired. The Sith saw nothing wrong with this practice. To them, the strong naturally dominated the weak. If other species could not defend themselves, they deserved their fate. This attitude would persist throughout Sith history, a defining characteristic that separated them philosophically from the Republic and Jedi. The Valley of the Dark Lords grew with each passing century. New tombs were carved for Dark Lords who died, each monument attempting to outdo its predecessors in grandeur. The tomb of Ajunta Pall occupied the most prominent position, a massive pyramid structure that dominated the valley. When Pall died, His body was interred in multiple chambers filled with treasures, weapons, and artifacts of dark power. His spirit remained tied to the tomb through Sith sorcery, ready to impart wisdom to those worthy enough to seek it. After Pall came other Dark Lords, each adding their own contribution to Sith civilization. Tulak Hord emerged as perhaps the greatest conqueror in early Sith history. What? Known as the Lord of Hate and Master of the Gathering Darkness, Hord expanded Sith control to distant systems. His military campaigns were legendary for their brutality and effectiveness. Hord was also a master of lightsaber combat and Sith sorcery, combining physical prowess with mystical power in ways few could match. Hord extended Sith influence to Dromund Kaas, a world shrouded in constant electrical storms. This planet would later serve as a refuge for the Sith during their darkest hours, but in Hord's time, it was simply another conquest, another world brought under the Dark Lord's dominion. Hord built temples on Dromund Kaas, establishing presence that would persist long after his death. When Hord died, his tomb in the Valley of the Dark Lords became a place of pilgrimage for aspiring Sith Lords. The tomb was said to contain his holocron, a device holding his knowledge and a fragment of his essence. Students who proved worthy could learn from Hord's teachings, gaining insights into combat and conquest from one of the Sith's greatest practitioners. But the tomb was also dangerous. Hord had set traps, both mundane and mystical, to ensure only the strong could reach his inner sanctum. The golden age of the Sith began around 5,200 years before Yavin, during the reign of a Dark Lord named Marka Ragnos. Ragnos was different from many who held the title before or after him. While incredibly powerful in combat and the Force, his true genius lay in leadership and manipulation. He understood Sith nature perhaps better than any Dark Lord who came before. Ragnos recognized that ambitious Sith Lords would always seek more power. Previous Dark Lords had attempted to suppress this ambition through force, which resulted in constant rebellion and assassination attempts. Ragnos took a different approach. He channeled Sith ambition rather than fighting it. He pitted potential rivals against each other, ensuring they spent energy competing with one another instead of challenging him. He rewarded successful subordinates with increased status and authority, binding them to his regime through tangible benefits. This political genius allowed Ragnos to reign as Dark Lord for over 100 years, an almost unprecedented tenure in Sith history. Under his rule, the Empire reached its apex, territory expanded to dozens of systems, wealth poured into Sith coffers from conquered worlds and enslaved populations. The arts of Sith sorcery advanced as multiple generations of practitioners built on previous knowledge. The Valley of the Dark Lords received magnificent new construction, temples, and monuments that made previous achievements seem modest. During Ragnos' reign, the native Sith species became increasingly rare. Centuries of interbreeding with humans and other species had diluted the genetic lines. Pure-blooded Sith still existed but were no longer the majority population. Instead, most Sith were hybrids, displaying varying degrees of the distinctive red skin, facial features, and glowing eyes. Some appeared almost entirely human save for minor characteristics. Others retained strong Sith traits. But all, regardless of their genetic heritage, considered themselves Sith, bound by philosophy and culture rather than pure species identity. Korriban, during the Golden Age, was a strange mixture of grandeur and desolation. The Valley of the Dark Lords had become a vast complex of tombs, temples, and training facilities. Thousands of Sith studied there, learning the ways of the dark side from masters who had spent lifetimes perfecting their techniques. The Academy, established in the valley's shadow, trained new generations of warriors and sorcerers. But beyond the valley, much of Korriban remained harsh and empty. The planet's population had never recovered from the civil wars following Idus's death. Most Sith preferred to live on Ziost or other conquered worlds where conditions were more hospitable. Korriban was visited for specific purposes, training, rituals, burials, but relatively few chose to make it their permanent home. The dark side energy continued to accumulate. Every death in the valley, every ritual performed, every student who tapped into the Force in that place of power added to the concentration. By the Golden Age, the valley had become a nexus of dark side energy so potent that merely standing within it could overwhelm unprepared Force sensitives. The very stone seemed alive with power, whispering secrets to those who knew how to listen. Marka Ragnos' reign could not last forever. Age caught up with even this greatest of Dark Lords, and around 5,000 years before Yavin, he died. His passing created the crisis he had managed to delay for over a century. A power vacuum at the top of Sith hierarchy, with multiple ambitious lords ready to claim the throne. Two emerged as primary contenders. Naga Sadow believed the Empire should expand aggressively, conquering new territories and growing in power. Ludo Kresh advocated consolidation, arguing the Empire should strengthen what it already held, rather than risk overextension. Both were powerful Sith lords. Both commanded significant followings. Both believed themselves the rightful heir to Ragnos' throne. The funeral of Marka Ragnos became the stage for their rivalry. As Sith gathered in the Valley of the Dark Lords to entomb their fallen leader, Sadow and Kresh arrived with their supporters. The ceremony became a power play, each faction trying to demonstrate superiority. Verbal sparring escalated into physical confrontation. Sadow and Kresh drew their lightsabers and dueled before the assembled mourners, fighting for the right to call themselves Dark Lord. Legend says that during the duel, something extraordinary happened. The spirit of Marka Ragnos appeared before the combatants. His ghostly form manifested with sufficient presence that everyone present witnessed it. Ragnos warned the dueling Sith Lords that their actions threatened everything he had built. He cautioned that while great potential awaited the Sith, terrible dangers existed as well. Then, having delivered his warning, the spirit vanished. The duel ended without a clear victor. Neither Sadow nor Kresh had definitively proven superiority. The succession remained unresolved. The Sith Empire stood at a crossroads, its future uncertain, its leadership divided. What happened next would reshape galactic history. But the catalyst for transformation would not come from within the Sith Empire. It would come from outside, from two explorers who made a single navigational error that would have consequences beyond anything they could have imagined. The Great Hyperspace War. In the year 5000, before the Battle of Yavin, two siblings named Gaev and Jory Darrigan made their living as hyperspace scouts, charting new routes through unexplored regions of space. They were not particularly successful. Most profitable routes had already been discovered and claimed by larger organizations. The Darrigans were struggling financially, taking risks that more established scouts would not, venturing into regions where star charts were incomplete or non-existent. During one such venture, they miscalculated their hyperspace jump. When their ship dropped back into real space, they found themselves in an unknown system. Scans detected a habitable planet, signs of advanced civilization, energy signatures indicating significant populations. The Darrigans assumed they had discovered a previously unknown Republic world. They set course for the planet, hoping to establish first contact relations and perhaps profit from their discovery. The planet was Korriban. The Darrigans had just stumbled into the heart of the Sith Empire. Their ship was immediately detected and tracked. Sith forces intercepted the Darrigan vessel before it could land. The siblings were captured and brought before Sith leadership as potential spies. To most Sith lords, these outsiders represented a threat to be eliminated. They had discovered the Empire's location. They might report back to whatever government they represented. The logical response was execution, but Naga Sadow saw something different. He saw opportunity. Sadow was still locked in his power struggle with Ludo Kresh. Neither could definitively claim leadership, while the other commanded significant support. Sadow needed something to tip the balance, something to demonstrate that his vision for an aggressive, expansionist empire was correct. The arrival of the Darrigan siblings gave him exactly what he needed. Sadow orchestrated a complex deception. He secretly freed the Darrigans from their prison, helping them escape. Then he staged a false flag attack, making it appear that Republic forces had mounted a rescue mission, assaulting Sith territory in the process. The plan worked perfectly. The Sith believed they were under attack from an external power that clearly knew about their empire and considered them enough of a threat to launch preemptive strikes. Ludo Kresh saw through the manipulation. He recognized that Sadow was manufacturing a crisis to seize power. But Kresh moved too late. Sadow launched a surprise attack against him, catching his forces unprepared. In the ensuing battle, Kresh's flagship was destroyed. The Sith assumed he died in the explosion, removing Sadow's primary obstacle to power. With Kresh seemingly dead, Naga Sadow became Dark Lord of the Sith. He immediately began preparing for war against the Republic. Sadow allowed Jory Darrigan to escape, secretly placing a tracking device on her ship. When she jumped to hyperspace, fleeing back to Republic territory, the tracking beacon would lead the Sith directly to the heart of their ancient enemies. Sadow assembled the greatest armada in Sith history. Hundreds of warships, thousands of warriors, weapons, and war machines accumulated over 1,000 years of isolated development. The Sith had been building their strength in secret while the Republic grew complacent. Now they would strike, conquering Republic space before the Jedi even understood what they faced. The Sith fleet arrived at multiple Republic worlds simultaneously in a coordinated assault. Coruscant, Koros, Kirek, and other key systems came under attack. The Republic had no warning. Their defenses were designed to handle pirates and minor conflicts, not an invasion by an empire of dark side force users they had never even known existed. Initial Republic resistance crumbled before Sith fury. Sadow commanded his forces from a specialized meditation sphere, using battle meditation to coordinate the fleet and enhance Sith effectiveness. More importantly, he employed Sith illusions on a massive scale, creating phantom ships that made the Sith Armada appear 10 times larger than it actually was. Republic defenders saw fleets that seemed inexhaustible, forces that couldn't possibly be defeated. Panic spread as reports came in of Sith victories across multiple systems. The Republic and Jedi faced the greatest threat in their history. The Sith Empire had emerged from the shadows, wielding powers and technologies the Republic could barely comprehend. The war might have ended in total Sith victory, if not for two factors that shifted the momentum. First, the Jedi adapted. Though they had never faced Sith before, the Jedi proved remarkably effective at countering dark side techniques once they understood what they confronted. They developed tactics for neutralizing Sith sorcery. They learned to sense illusions and see through deceptions. Jedi battle meditation countered Sadow's coordination of Sith forces. What had seemed like an unstoppable invasion began to bog down as defenders learned to fight effectively. Second, betrayal came from within. Gav Darrigan, the male explorer captured with his sister, had been taken under Naga Sadow's wing. The Dark Lord saw potential in the young man and began training him in Sith techniques. But as Gav witnessed the brutality of the Sith assault on Republic worlds that included his home, people he knew, his loyalty wavered. In a pivotal moment, Gav infiltrated Sadow's meditation sphere. He attacked the Dark Lord directly, breaking his concentration and disrupting the battle meditation coordinating Sith forces. Without Sadow's sorcery maintaining the illusions, Republic defenders suddenly realized that much of the Sith fleet was mere phantoms. The revelation spread quickly through Republic communications. Morale surged as defenders understood the enemy was not inexhaustible. Naga Sadow recognized that momentum had shifted. He ordered a retreat. The Sith Armada pulled back from Republic space, fleeing toward their territory with Republic forces in pursuit. What had begun as a war of conquest transformed into a desperate fight for survival. When Sadow returned to Sith space with his damaged fleet, a shock awaited. Ludo Kresh had survived the earlier battle. While Sadow led the invasion, Kresh gathered his supporters and seized control of the Sith homeworlds. As Sadow's battered ships arrived in orbit around Korriban, they faced Kresh's fleet, ready for battle. Civil war erupted in the worst possible moment. With Republic forces approaching, the two Sith factions turned weapons on each other. Ships already damaged from the Republic campaign now faced fire from their own kind. It was precisely the scenario Marka Ragnos' spirit had warned against, the fracturing that could destroy everything the Sith had built. Sadow managed to destroy Kresh's flagship, seemingly killing his rival once and for all. But the victory came too late. Before Sadow could consolidate his position, Republic warships arrived in the system. The Jedi had tracked the Sith retreat and brought the full might of the Republic military to Korriban itself. Caught between pursuing Republic forces and the remnants of Kresh's fleet, Sadow made a desperate gamble. He ordered his flagship to the nearby Denarii binary star system. There, using forbidden Sith techniques, he caused one of the stars to go supernova. The explosion destroyed a portion of the pursuing Republic fleet and created enough chaos for Sadow to escape with a handful of loyal Massassi warriors. Sadow fled to the remote jungle moon of Yavin 4. There, in dense jungles far from civilized space, he went into hiding. The once mighty Dark Lord was reduced to a refugee, preserving what little knowledge he could, waiting for a chance that would never come in his lifetime. He would eventually die on Yavin 4, but his legacy would persist, his temples remaining to influence future generations. Back in Sith space, the Republic showed no mercy. They systematically attacked and destroyed every Sith stronghold they could find. The Jedi were determined to eliminate the Sith threat completely, having seen the danger these dark side practitioners posed. The war became a campaign of extermination. Korriban received particular attention. Republic forces landed in force, assaulting the Valley of the Dark Lords. Ancient temples were bombarded from orbit. Tombs were broken open and their contents destroyed or confiscated. The Sith Academy was reduced to rubble. The Republic was thorough, recognizing that Korriban was not just a military target, but the spiritual heart of Sith civilization. The native Sith species, already rare due to centuries of interbreeding, were decimated. Thousands died in the Republic assault. Survivors scattered to remote worlds or went into hiding. The grand civilization that had flourished for 1,000 years was shattered. The Sith Empire that had stood proud since the days of Ajunta Pall collapsed into ruins. The Valley of the Dark Lords, that ancient place of power, lay abandoned. The great temples stood empty, their corridors haunted only by ghosts. The tombs remained but were looted of their treasures, their protective barriers broken. The monuments erected by Dark Lords through the centuries stared out across a valley that had become a true graveyard. Its living population vanished or killed. Republic forces withdrew after completing their devastation. They believed they had eliminated the Sith threat. Historical records from this period refer to the complete extinction of the Sith Order. The Republic congratulated itself on averting a great danger, on preventing the dark side from gaining a permanent foothold in galactic civilization. They were wrong. The Sith were diminished, scattered, nearly destroyed, but extinction, that was premature. Because unknown to the Republic, during the chaos of the Great Hyperspace War, one Sith Lord had neither joined Sadow's doomed invasion nor fallen to Republic forces. His name was Vixiat, and he had plans that would ensure the Sith survived in ways the Republic never imagined. The hidden Sith Emperor. While the Great Hyperspace War raged and the Sith Empire crumbled, Vixiat remained hidden, watching as everything his civilization had built was destroyed. He was a Sith Lord of considerable power, but more importantly, he possessed patience and a capacity for long-term planning that separated him from more impulsive dark side practitioners. As the Republic crushed Sith resistance, Vitiate sent out a call to surviving Sith Lords. He promised them a way to escape Republic hunters, a method to rebuild their strength. Hundreds of surviving Sith answered his summons, gathering on the world of Nathema. They believed Vitiate would perform a ritual to save them all, to grant them power to resist the Republic onslaught. It was a deception more terrible than anything Naga Sadow had orchestrated. Once the Sith Lords were assembled, Vitiate enacted a ritual of extraordinary scale and horror. He linked all the gathered Sith into a network, then drained their life essence completely. Not just the Sith Lords, but every living being on Nathema. Every plant, every animal, every microbe died in a single moment as Vitiate consumed their life force. The ritual accomplished two things. First, it granted Vitiate virtual immortality and power beyond what any single Sith Lord had possessed. Second, it severed Nathema's connection to the Force itself, turning the planet into a void that Force sensitives would instinctively avoid, helping to hide Vitiate's actions from Jedi detection. With his newfound power, Vitiate gathered the remaining Sith who had not attended his deadly ritual. Around 4,900 years before Yavin, he led this remnant into the unknown regions, far beyond Republic space. They settled on Dromund Kaas, the world once conquered by Tulak Hord, a planet shrouded in constant storms that helped hide their presence. Vitiate proclaimed himself Sith Emperor and began building a new Sith Empire in absolute secret. Unlike the old empire with its constant power struggles, Vitiate established himself as an undisputed and seemingly eternal ruler. For the next 1,500 years, this hidden empire would develop in isolation, training new generations, advancing technology, building strength, while the Republic remained completely unaware of its existence. This meant Korriban remained abandoned, forgotten by the greater galaxy. The planet that had been the Sith's spiritual home for thousands of years sat empty, its tombs sealed, its temples crumbling, its population scattered or dead. Sand reclaimed monuments, wind eroded statues. The Valley of the Dark Lords became truly a valley of death, populated only by the restless dead whose spirits lingered in that place of concentrated dark power. The Republic eventually removed Korriban from standard star charts. The planet was quarantined, designated as a place too dangerous to visit. The Jedi established monitoring stations to ensure no one attempted to access whatever dark side artifacts or knowledge might remain. But these monitoring efforts were sporadic at best, and over centuries, even they diminished. Korriban faded from galactic memory, becoming a legend rather than a real place, a cautionary tale rather than an actual world. But the dark side does not forget. In the tombs and temples of the Valley of the Dark Lords, power still lingered. The spirits of ancient Sith remained, bound to the world through their connection to the Force, waiting in the darkness for the day when students might return to learn from them. That day was coming, sooner than anyone imagined. Character count reached, continuing in next message if needed. Centuries of desolation. For 400 years after the Great Hyperspace War, Korriban remained a forgotten tomb. The planet existed outside the awareness of most galactic citizens. Even those who had heard legends of the Sith homeworld treated it as ancient history, irrelevant to modern times. The Jedi had won. The Sith were extinct. That chapter of history was closed. Then, around 4,400 years before Yavin, a Jedi Knight arrived on Ossus, seeking training. His name was Freedon Nadd, and he brought with him tremendous natural talent and an insatiable hunger for knowledge. The Jedi Masters recognized his potential, but also sensed something dangerous in his nature. Nadd was impatient, ambitious, unwilling to accept the measured pace of Jedi training. When his master, Matta Tremaine, refused to teach him certain advanced techniques, Nadd's frustration boiled over into rage. In that moment of anger, he struck his master down, killing the very person who had tried to guide him. The act completed Nadd's fall to the dark side. He fled the Jedi Order, knowing he could never return, driven by desperation to find someone who would teach him what the Jedi refused. Nadd followed instincts he didn't fully understand, drawn by the Force towards something he couldn't name. His path took him to Yavin 4, where he discovered the suspended form of Naga Sadow, the ancient Dark Lord, preserved through a Sith sorcery for 600 years, awakened at Nadd's presence. Here, finally, was someone willing to teach the fallen Jedi what he hungered to learn. Sadow trained Nadd in Sith sorcery for months, teaching techniques passed down from the golden age of the Sith Empire. But before the training was complete, Nadd's arrogance and impatience led him to believe he had learned enough. He killed Sadow, his master and teacher, demonstrating the Sith principle that apprentices eventually surpass and destroy their masters. But Nadd still felt incomplete. He knew Sadow's knowledge came from somewhere, that there were older secrets waiting to be discovered. Following information gleaned from Sadow's teachings, he traveled to Korriban, seeking the tombs of ancient Sith lords. Imagine his arrival on that dead world. 4 centuries had passed since the great Hyperspace War. The Valley of the Dark Lords was a ruin. Sand had drifted against the tomb facades. Statues had fallen or been eroded by wind. The Academy was rubble. The great temples stood empty, their doors sealed or blocked by cave-ins. The planet was silent, save for wind and the occasional cry of scavengers that had adapted to survive in the ruins. But power remained. Nadd could feel it the moment he entered the valley. The dark side energy, concentrated there over millennia, had not dissipated. If anything, the abandonment had allowed it to grow stronger, no longer channeled by living practitioners, but pooling like water in a depression, waiting. Nadd explored the tombs. Many were sealed or collapsed, their contents inaccessible, but in others he found what he sought: artifacts of power, ancient Sith amulets and talismans, weapons forged through alchemy, and most importantly, holocrons. These devices, created by Sith lords to preserve their knowledge, still functioned despite centuries of neglect. Among the most significant finds was the holocron of King Adus, the legendary Sithari, who had ruled 20,000 years before. This ancient device contained knowledge predating the arrival of the Dark Jedi, pure Sith philosophy and technique developed by the species themselves. For Nadd, seeking to master all aspects of dark power, this was treasure beyond price. Armed with stolen knowledge and artifacts, Freedon Nadd departed Korriban, he traveled to Onderon, a world he would conquer and rule for decades, spreading Sith teachings and creating a dark side dynasty. His influence on Onderon would persist for 400 years after his death, corrupting generations of that planet's rulers. But Nadd's visit to Korriban established a pattern that would repeat throughout the next several millennia. Dark side practitioners seeking knowledge the Jedi forbade would find their way to the ancient Sith homeworld. They would brave the ruins of the Valley of the Dark Lords, risking the dangers that lurked there, all for a chance to learn from the masters who had died centuries or millennia before. Approximately 4,000 years before Yavin, another fallen Jedi would follow Nadd's path to Korriban. This one, however, would prove far more consequential than Freedon Nadd ever managed to be. Exar Kun's trials. Exar Kun was among the most talented Jedi of his generation. He studied under Vodo Siask Bas, one of the Order's most respected masters. But, like Nadd before him, Kun was arrogant, impatient, convinced that the measured pace of Jedi training was holding him back from his true potential. When he discovered forbidden knowledge about the Sith in his master's archives, curiosity became obsession. Kun left the Jedi Order and traveled to Onderon, where Freedon Nadd's dynasty still ruled. There, in a tomb on Onderon's moon Dixun, Kun encountered the spirit of Freedon Nadd himself. The dead Sith Lord saw opportunity in this fallen Jedi, a chance to extend his influence beyond the limitations of death. Nadd directed Kun to Korriban, just as he himself had been drawn there centuries before. Kun arrived on Korriban while the rest of the Jedi Order was meeting at the Conclave of Deneba. The planet remained largely abandoned, though 4 centuries of neglect had taken additional toll. More tombs had collapsed, weather had eroded monuments further. The already desolate world had grown even more silent and dead. Kun landed in the Valley of the Dark Lords and immediately understood why Nadd had sent him. The concentration of dark power was overwhelming. For a force sensitive of Kun's strength, the valley itself seemed alive, whispering promises of knowledge and power. The spirits of ancient Sith, bound to this place through death and sorcery, sensed his presence and took interest. As Kun descended into the valley, he was attacked by animated corpses, skeletons given movement through dark side energy. These were not true undead, but constructs, lingering manifestations of Sith sorcery that protected the tombs from intruders. Kun destroyed several, demonstrating his strength, proving he was no common grave robber. The spirit of Freedon Nadd appeared, beckoning Kun deeper into a temple. Kun followed, drawn by curiosity, despite growing unease about the immense dark power he felt. The temple was one of the oldest in the valley, built by the first Dark Lords, its halls carved with inscriptions in the ancient Sith language. The very walls seemed to pulse with malevolent energy. Deep within the temple, Kun discovered a chamber containing a massive crystal. This crystal held the spirits of Jedi Masters who had been defeated by ancient Sith Lords, their consciousness trapped in eternal torment, their light side essence slowly corrupted and consumed by the darkness surrounding them. The sight horrified Kun, giving him a glimpse of what the Sith were truly capable of, the depths of cruelty and domination they could achieve. Kun attempted to flee, finally recognizing the danger he had walked into. But the exit had been sealed in a rock slide, not natural, but orchestrated by the spirits testing him. Kun was trapped, buried alive beneath tons of stone, his body crushed by the weight of the rockfall. In this moment of absolute desperation, as death approached, Freedon Nadd's spirit appeared before him. Nadd offered a choice: embrace the dark side completely and use its power to save himself, or refuse and die beneath the stones of Korriban, another forgotten victim of Sith trials. Kun, faced with imminent death, abandoned his remaining reservations. He drew on the dark side with all his strength, using hatred and rage to fuel powers he had never fully embraced before. The stones lifted, floating away, as Kun rose from what should have been his tomb. He emerged from the temple transformed, tainted by the dark side in ways that could never be fully reversed. The spirits of ancient Sith, including King Otis himself, recognized his power and accepted him as worthy of their teachings. But Kun's trials on Korriban were not complete. Nadd directed him to continue to Yavin 4, where Kun would complete his transformation and ultimately become a Dark Lord of the Sith. Kun's time on Korriban was brief, lasting perhaps only days, but its impact was profound. He established a small Sith Academy in the valley, gathering followers who shared his rejection of Jedi teachings. This academy operated for only a few years before being abandoned after Kun's defeat in the Great Sith War. But it marked the first significant Sith presence on Korriban since the planet's devastation. For the next several centuries, Korriban returned to its desolate state. Occasional dark side practitioners might visit, seeking knowledge or artifacts, but no permanent presence was established. The planet was simply too harsh, too dangerous, too saturated with dark side energy for comfortable habitation. It remained a place of pilgrimage and trial, rather than a living center of civilization. But that was about to change. The next visitors to Korriban would not be lone fallen Jedi seeking forbidden knowledge. They would be conquerors returning to reclaim what had once been theirs. Revan and Malak. 3,959 years before the Battle of Yavin, two Jedi Knights named Revan and Malak defied the Jedi Council. The Mandalorian Wars were devastating the Republic, and the Council refused to intervene, believing non-intervention was the wisest course. Revan and Malak disagreed. They rallied Jedi who shared their views and led Republic forces against the Mandalorians, ultimately defeating them at the Battle of Malachor V. But victory came with a price. During their pursuit of the defeated Mandalorians into the unknown regions, Revan and Malak encountered the hidden Sith Empire that Vitiate had built. The Sith Emperor dominated their minds, twisting them to serve his purposes. He anointed them Darth Revan and Darth Malak, sent them back to Republic space as advance agents of his eventual invasion. But Revan and Malak broke free of the Emperor's mental control. Instead of serving Vitiate's purposes, they established their own Sith Empire, seeking to conquer the Republic for themselves. And one of the first actions they took was to return to Korriban. Raven understood the symbolic importance of the Sith homeworld. He also recognized the wealth of knowledge stored in the tombs of the Valley of the Dark Lords. Revan's Sith forces seized Korriban, establishing military control over the planet for the first time in nearly 1,500 years. The Sith Academy was rebuilt from its ruins. The great temple complex that had been destroyed in the Great Hyperspace War was reconstructed, though on a smaller scale than its original glory. Revan established this academy as the primary training facility for his Sith forces, a place where Force sensitives who joined his cause could learn the ways of the dark side. Under Revan's rule, the academy was strict and brutal. Students competed viciously for advancement, understanding that only the strong would survive to become full Sith Lords. The training pushed students to their limits and beyond, forcing them to embrace the dark side through suffering and conflict. This philosophy reflected ancient Sith values, the same principles that had shaped King Adas 25,000 years before. Archaeological teams accompanied the military occupation. Revan sent experts to excavate the ancient tombs, seeking artifacts and knowledge the previous civilizations had left behind. They discovered Rakatan star maps, ancient devices created by the Infinite Empire that had once invaded Korriban in Adas's time. One such star map was found in the tomb of Naga Sadow, though Sadow himself had never been buried there, having died on Yavin 4. These star maps would prove crucial. They contained information about the location of the Star Forge, an ancient Rakatan superweapon capable of producing unlimited ships and weapons. With the Star Forge under his control, Revan waged the Jedi Civil War against the Republic, nearly conquering the galaxy. But Revan was betrayed by his apprentice. Darth Malak, jealous and ambitious, ordered his flagship to fire on Revan's ship during a Jedi strike team's assault. The attack nearly killed Revan, who was captured by the Jedi. The Jedi Council wiped Revan's memories, giving him a new identity, planning to use his subconscious knowledge to find and destroy the Star Forge. Malak, believing himself sole Dark Lord now, took control of Korriban's academy. His rule was even harsher than Revan's had been. Malak cared nothing for subtle teaching or long-term development. He wanted warriors immediately, soldiers to throw at the Republic in mass assaults. The academy under Malak became a factory for producing dark side killers, quantity valued over quality. The redeemed Revan eventually returned to Korriban as part of his quest to find the Star Forge. Disguised as a potential academy student, he infiltrated the school and gained access to the tombs in the Valley of the Dark Lords. There, he entered multiple ancient burial complexes, including those of Ajunta Pall, Tulak Hord, Marka Ragnos, and Naga Sadow. In the tomb of Ajunta Pall, Revan encountered the spirit of the first Dark Lord. Paul's consciousness had lingered for millennia, trapped in the tomb by his own dark side energies. Paul spoke with Revan, recognizing power in this visitor, though not knowing his true identity. The ancient Sith Lord spoke of the price of power, the burden of the darkness he had embraced. In a moment of profound significance, Revan convinced Paul to let go of his anger and hate, allowing the spirit to finally achieve peace and fade into the Force. It was an act of redemption that few could have achieved, freeing one of history's most significant dark side practitioners from thousands of years of torment. After retrieving what he needed from the tombs, Revan killed Uthar Wynn, the Academy's headmaster, and fled with his companions. The Academy descended into chaos. Without strong leadership, competing students and instructors fought for control. When Revan later defeated Darth Malak and destroyed the Starforge, ending the Jedi Civil War, the Sith forces on Korriban collapsed into infighting. The civil war among the leaderless Sith was brutal and swift. Within months, they had largely destroyed themselves. Survivors fled or went into hiding. The Academy was abandoned once again. Tombs were ransacked by treasure hunters and surviving Sith seeking artifacts to sustain themselves. The valley descended into chaos as various factions fought over the planet's remaining resources. When the dust settled, Korriban was once again a dead world, though this time the desolation was more complete than before. The tombs had been thoroughly looted. The Academy lay in ruins yet again. The dark side energy remained, concentrated and potent, but there was no one left to study it or channel it. The pattern had repeated. Sith rose, Korriban flourished briefly, then violence and defeat brought abandonment. The planet seemed cursed, destined to rise from desolation only to fall again, an eternal cycle of death and rebirth that mirrored the Sith philosophy itself. But the greatest age of Korriban still lay in the future. When it came, the planet would see power and grandeur that exceeded even the golden age of Marka Ragnos. The hidden Sith Empire, the one built by Vitiate in the unknown regions, was finally ready to reveal itself and reclaim its ancient homeworld. The Old Republic era. 3,681 years before Yavin, the peace of the Republic shattered when the Sith Empire emerged from the unknown regions. This was Vitiate's empire, the one built in secret over 1,500 years, now ready to exact revenge on the Republic and Jedi who had destroyed their ancestors. One of the Sith Empire's first major objectives was retaking Korriban. The planet held immense symbolic value as the ancestral homeworld of the Sith. More practically, it contained knowledge and artifacts that could strengthen the Empire's forces. A Sith Lord named Vindican led the assault, commanding a fleet that overwhelmed the small Republic garrison, maintaining the orbital quarantine. The conquest was swift and total. Republic forces defending Korriban were wiped out in orbital battle. Ground forces were eliminated or captured. The Sith Empire reclaimed the planet for the first time in over 1,300 years. This was not a temporary occupation, but a permanent reconquest, the Empire settling in for a long stay. Massive reconstruction began immediately. The Sith Academy was rebuilt on a scale that exceeded anything Revan or Malak had created. The new academy was a fortress-like structure that dominated the Valley of the Dark Lords, a pyramid of stone and metal that housed thousands of students, instructors, administrators, and support staff. It became the premier training facility for the Sith Empire, producing generation after generation of dark side practitioners. The Academy of this era operated under different principles than earlier versions. Competition remained intense, but there was more structure, more formal curriculum. Students progressed through trials designed to test their strength, cunning, and command of the dark side. Only the strongest survived to become full Sith Lords, but those who did were formidable, shaped by an educational system refined over millennia. The tombs in the Valley of the Dark Lords received restoration as well. Collapsed passages were excavated and reinforced. Stolen artifacts were recovered where possible. The Sith understood that these tombs contained not just material wealth, but knowledge, the accumulated wisdom of ancient Dark Lords whose understanding of the Force could teach modern practitioners. During this period, Korriban thrived as it hadn't since the days before the Great Hyperspace War. Thousands of Sith lived on the planet, most associated with the Academy, but some serving in administrative or military roles. The settlement of Dreshti, located near the valley, grew from a small outpost into a proper town, serving as a commercial hub where supplies were traded and minor businesses operated. The dark side energy in the Valley of the Dark Lords reached unprecedented levels, with thousands of Force sensitives drawing on the dark side daily, conducting rituals, engaging in conflicts that sometimes turned lethal. The concentration of power grew exponentially. The valley became so saturated with dark side energy that merely entering it could drive unprepared individuals mad. Weaker minds broke within hours of exposure. Even seasoned Sith had to be cautious, lest they be overwhelmed by the sheer intensity of power flowing through that place. But this golden age, like all that came before, could not last forever. The Sith Empire's war with the Republic ground on for decades. Eventually, treaties were signed, creating an uneasy Cold War between the two powers. During this period, Korriban remained firmly in Sith hands, though both sides raided enemy territory periodically. Around 3,637 years before Yavin, the Republic launched a daring assault on Korriban itself. Republic forces invaded the planet and briefly seized the Sith Academy. The occupation lasted only a short time before Sith reinforcements arrived and drove the Republic off. But the raid demonstrated that even the Sith homeworld was not invulnerable. The Academy produced numerous legendary Sith during this era. Two in particular would become famous: the Emperor's Wrath and Darth Nox. These were not names but titles, identities adopted by powerful Sith who rose through the ranks with exceptional speed. The Emperor's Wrath became the personal enforcer of the Sith Emperor, answering only to vitiate himself. Darth Nox gained a seat on the Dark Council, the ruling body of the Empire, wielding power exceeded by very few. Eventually, the Sith Empire was challenged by a new power, the Eternal Empire of Zakuul. This third faction, located in wild space, possessed technology and resources that exceeded both the Republic and Sith Empire. When the Eternal Empire demanded submission, the Sith refused. In retaliation, Zakuul's fleet bombarded Korriban from orbit. The bombardment was devastating. Many of the reconstructed temples were reduced to rubble. Ancient tombs that had survived for thousands of years finally collapsed under bombardment. The Sith Academy itself was heavily damaged, though not completely destroyed. Countless artifacts, priceless repositories of Sith knowledge, were buried beneath the sands, lost perhaps forever. After the bombardment, Korriban's population decreased significantly. The planet remained in Sith hands, but its prominence declined. The Academy was rebuilt yet again, but on a smaller scale. Many of the Empire's most important functions shifted to Droman Khas and other worlds. Korriban retained its spiritual significance, but ceased to be the vibrant center of Sith activity it had been during the height of the Old Republic era. The pattern continued. Destruction followed by rebuilding, Glory followed by fall, a cycle that seemed inescapable. Korriban endured, as it always did, harsh and unforgiving, waiting for the next time it would matter to galactic events. Continuing to conclusion. The Rule of Two. Around 1,000 years before the Battle of Yavin, the Sith found themselves locked in what became known as the New Sith Wars. Multiple factions of dark side practitioners, organized loosely under the Brotherhood of Darkness, fought against the Republic and Jedi for control of the galaxy. The war dragged on for centuries, grinding down both sides in seemingly endless conflict. One Sith student, born as Decel on the mining world of Apatros, rose through the ranks of the Brotherhood with remarkable speed. Taking the name Bane, he enrolled in the Sith Academy on Korriban and quickly distinguished himself as exceptional. But as Bane studied the ancient texts in the Academy's archives, he came to a disturbing realization. The Brotherhood of Darkness was weak. They had diluted Sith strength by embracing equality among Dark Lords, by expanding numbers at the expense of quality. Bane studied the holocrons of ancient Sith and understood that true power came from competition, from the strong destroying the weak, from concentration rather than dispersal. The Brotherhood had abandoned these principles in favor of unity, and in Bane's view, this was destroying them. Bane left the Academy and traveled to Lahan, seeking the star forge that Revan had used millennia before. Though the superweapon had been destroyed, Bane discovered something almost as valuable: a holocron created by Darth Revan himself. From this ancient device, Bane learned techniques and philosophies that confirmed his own conclusions. Bane returned to Korriban, briefly visiting the Valley of the Dark Lords one final time. He hoped to find additional knowledge from the tombs of ancient Sith Lords, secrets that might help him forge a new path. But to his disappointment, he found the tombs had been too thoroughly looted over the centuries. The artifacts were gone, the holocrons missing. Whatever knowledge remained was locked away in spirits too faded to communicate clearly. Disappointed, but not deterred, Bane left Korriban for what would be the last time. He had learned what he needed from Revan's holocron. Bane proceeded with his plan, manipulating the Brotherhood of Darkness into destroying itself at the Battle of Ruusan through use of a thought bomb that killed all Force sensitives in the area, except for Bane himself, who had evacuated before detonation. With the Brotherhood destroyed, Bane established a new doctrine, the Rule of Two. There would be only two Sith at any given time, a master to embody power and an apprentice to crave it. This would eliminate the infighting and betrayal that had plagued earlier Sith organizations, while ensuring continuous improvement as each apprentice eventually surpassed and killed their master. The Rule of Two meant Korriban's relevance diminished dramatically. With only two Sith existing at any time, there was no need for a massive academy or extensive infrastructure. The planet remained important symbolically, the ancestral home of the Sith, but it ceased to be a living center of activity. For the next 1,000 years, Korriban sat largely abandoned. Occasional Sith Lords visited to pay respects to ancient predecessors or to search for artifacts missed by previous looters. But these were brief pilgrimages, rather than permanent settlements. The valley returned to silence, its tombs sealed, its temples empty save for ghosts. The dark side energy remained, concentrated and potent, waiting in the stone like a sleeping beast. The spirits of ancient Sith lingered, their consciousness trapped between life and death, aware but unable to fully interact with the material world. They waited in the darkness, patient as only the dead can be, for the day when living beings might return to learn from them. The long silence. As the rule of two Sith hid in the shadows, working slowly toward their goal of revenge against the Jedi, Korriban became a forgotten footnote in galactic history. The planet remained on star charts, but was marked as dangerous. Quarantined by Republic decree, the Jedi maintained sporadic monitoring to ensure no one accessed whatever dark side materials might remain. But even this attention was minimal and intermittent. The physical deterioration continued without maintenance. The reconstructed academy collapsed further. The temples eroded under constant wind and temperature cycling. Even the massive monuments carved into the valley walls began to show serious wear, their features smoothed by centuries of sand-blasting winds. Nature was slowly reclaiming Korriban, burying monuments beneath drifts of red sand, sealing tombs with natural cave-ins. But the dark side did not fade. If anything, left undisturbed by living practitioners, it grew stronger, more concentrated, pooling in the valley like water gathering in a depression. The Valley of the Dark Lords became a place of immense power, a nexus where the barrier between life and death had grown paper thin, where reality itself seemed unstable under the weight of accumulated darkness. Creatures adapted to the environment. Tukata, Sith, hounds created through ancient alchemy, continued to reproduce in the wild. These beasts, originally designed as guardians for tombs, had become feral, but retained their connection to the dark side. They hunted in the ruins, preying on any living thing foolish enough to venture into the valley. The hounds served as inadvertent guardians, ensuring that casual treasure hunters rarely survived long enough to thoroughly loot the tombs. Other creatures inhabited the ruins as well. Kalor's lugs, massive worms capable of dragging down unwary travelers, nested in collapsed passages. Shirak, bat-like creatures that dwelt in caves, hunted anything small enough to catch. The ecosystem of Korriban was sparse but deadly, perfectly suited to a world saturated with a dark side energy. The rule of two Sith occasionally visited Korriban during this long period. Darth Bane himself returned at least once, seeking Revan's tomb, hoping to find additional knowledge from the ancient Dark Lord. Later, Sith Lords made similar pilgrimages, though always briefly, always secretly. They came seeking knowledge or artifacts, paid their respects to ancient predecessors, then departed, maintaining the secrecy that the rule of two demanded. The spirits in the valley remained aware during all this time. The ancient Sith Lords, whose consciousness lingered in their tombs, experienced time differently than the living. For them, centuries might pass like moments, or single moments might stretch into subjective eternities. They existed in a state between aware but not truly conscious, dreaming but not sleeping, waiting for stimuli that rarely came. Korriban's reputation in the wider galaxy transformed during this period. It shifted from being a known threat to becoming a legend, a myth, a place that might not even truly exist. Stories were told of the ancient Sith homeworld, tales that grew increasingly exaggerated with each retelling. Some claimed the planet was protected by invincible guardians. Others said it had been destroyed completely, reduced to asteroid rubble. The truth, that it simply sat empty and forgotten, seemed less dramatic than fiction. The Jedi Order itself gradually forgot the lessons learned in their ancient wars with the Sith. New generations of Jedi grew up knowing the Sith only as historical villains, extinct threats that no longer required vigilance. The Order's focus shifted to present concerns, mediating disputes, maintaining peace, serving the Republic in its daily governance. The idea that the Sith might return seemed as absurd as believing the Rakata would reconquer the galaxy. This complacency would prove nearly fatal, because the rule of two Sith were patient, careful, and absolutely committed to their ultimate goal, the complete destruction of the Jedi Order and the establishment of Sith dominance over the galaxy. And when they finally revealed themselves, when Darth Sidious and his apprentices moved to seize power, one of the few who would sense the depth of the threat was Jedi Master Yoda, who would make one final journey to the ancient Sith homeworld to confront the darkness that had never truly died. The final visit. During the Clone Wars, approximately 19 years before the Battle of Yavin, Jedi Master Yoda received a mission from Force priestesses who resided in the wellspring of life. These ancient beings tasked Yoda with completing trials that would teach him the secret of maintaining consciousness after death, the technique that would later be called becoming one with the Force. One trial required Yoda to visit the ancient Sith homeworld. By this time, the planet had been renamed Moraband in official records, though the old name Korriban still appeared in historical texts. The name change reflected linguistic drift, or perhaps a deliberate attempt to distance the modern galaxy from its dark history. Whatever the reason, the world Yoda approached in his starfighter remained the same planet where Sith civilization had been born tens of thousands of years before. Yoda landed on Moraband's surface and proceeded on foot to the Valley of the Dark Lords. The landscape was desolate beyond description. 30,000 years of wind had worn the monument smooth and had buried many structures completely. The great temples stood as ruins, their walls cracked, their interiors collapsed. It was a graveyard, silent and dead, populated only by ghosts and the memory of ancient evils. But the dark side energy remained overwhelming. Even Yoda, one of the most powerful Jedi Masters in history, felt the oppressive weight of darkness that saturated this place. The valley itself seemed hostile to his presence. The light side energy he carried an offense to the concentrated darkness that had accumulated over millennia. Yoda encountered visions and challenges. He faced illusions of Sith warriors, manifestations created by the dark side energy, or perhaps by the lingering spirits of ancient Dark Lords. He saw the tomb of Darth Bane, the Sith, who had created the rule of two 1,000 years before. The tomb was massive but weathered, its entrance sealed, its guardian spirits silent. Inside one of the temples, Yoda confronted projections of Darth Sidious and Count Dooku, the current Sith Lords, though Yoda did not yet know Sidious's true identity. These were not the actual Sith. but visions created through the Force, manifestations designed to tempt or break Yoda, to turn him to the dark side, or destroy his mind. The experience was harrowing even for a Jedi of Yoda's strength and wisdom. But Yoda passed the trials. He recognized the visions for what they were, illusions and tests rather than reality. He maintained his connection to the light side despite the overwhelming darkness surrounding him. And in doing so, he learned what the Force priestesses had sent him to discover. That consciousness could survive death. That identity could persist beyond the dissolution of the physical body. Yoda departed Moraband, leaving the dead planet to its eternal silence. His visit was brief, lasting perhaps only a day, but it served its purpose. He had confronted the heart of darkness and emerged unbroken. He had touched the legacy of the ancient Sith and rejected it, choosing light over darkness, life over the half-existence of the trapped spirits who lingered in the tombs. This was the last significant recorded visit to Korriban/Moraband by anyone of historical importance. After Yoda departed, the planet returned to its desolate state, unchanged and unchanging, a monument to civilizations that rose and fell, to philosophies of power and domination, to the eternal conflict between light and darkness. The Sith themselves would soon be destroyed. When Darth Sidious died and Darth Vader was redeemed, the line of succession established by Darth Bane ended. The rule of two was broken. The prophecy of the Chosen One was fulfilled. The Sith, who had survived for thousands of years through countless defeats and setbacks, finally faced true extinction, or so it seemed. The dark side itself cannot be destroyed, only channeled and balanced. And Korriban remained, patient and eternal, saturated with power accumulated over 30 millennia, waiting for the next time ambition and darkness might lead someone to seek its secrets. The legacy. To understand Korriban is to understand the Sith themselves. This harsh world, with its red sands and jagged mountains, created a species that valued strength above all else. The native Sith developed their philosophy not in comfortable temples or academic halls, but in deserts where weakness meant death, where power was the only currency that mattered. When fallen Jedi discovered Korriban, they found a people whose values aligned perfectly with the dark side. The merger of cultures, the blending of refined Force techniques with raw natural power, created something greater than either group alone could have achieved. The Sith Order that emerged from this fusion would threaten the galaxy for millennia, rising again and again from defeats that should have destroyed them. The Valley of the Dark Lords stands as testament to Sith philosophy. It is a place where death itself was defied, where consciousness persisted beyond the body, where power accumulated until the very stone remembered darkness. Every tomb tells a story of ambition and conquest. Every monument celebrates strength and domination. The valley is a physical manifestation of Sith belief, proof that power matters more than compassion, that the strong rightfully rule the weak. But the valley also demonstrates the ultimate failure of Sith philosophy. For all their power, for all their knowledge, for all their domination, the Sith never achieved lasting peace or stability. They rose and fell in endless cycles, their empires collapsing under the weight of internal betrayal and external attack. The valley, for all its monuments to eternal glory, became a graveyard, its population of honored dead far exceeding any living community the Sith ever maintained. Korriban's history teaches that power alone is insufficient. The Sith commanded tremendous strength, wielded abilities that terrified their enemies, built empires that seemed invincible. But without other principles, compassion, cooperation, sacrifice, their achievements proved temporary. Each Sith Empire collapsed. Each generation of Dark Lords fell to defeat, and Korriban itself descended repeatedly into desolation and abandonment. Yet the dark side endures. It is not evil incarnate, but an aspect of the Force itself, part of the natural balance. Anger, fear, passion, these emotions exist in all sentient beings. The dark side emerges from these feelings, channeling them into power. The Sith made the mistake of believing the dark side was all they needed. That power justified any action. That strength alone could build lasting civilization. Korriban remains as it always has. The tombs still stand, weathered but intact. The temples are ruins but recognizable. The dark side energy still saturates the Valley of the Dark Lords, waiting in the stone. The planet has survived 30,000 years of history, outlasting every empire that claimed it, enduring through wars and ages of peace alike. Perhaps someday, someone will return to Korriban, seeking knowledge of the ancient Sith. Perhaps archaeologists will excavate the tombs systematically, documenting what remains of Sith civilization. Perhaps scholars will translate the inscriptions, learning the true history of the species and philosophy that nearly conquered the galaxy multiple times. Or perhaps Korriban will remain forgotten, a dead world left to its ghosts and memories. The dark side will continue to pool in the valley, patient as only lifeless stone can be patient. The spirits of ancient Sith Lords will wait in their tombs, aware but unable to act, dreaming of glory that will never return. Either way, Korriban endures. It is the birthplace of the Sith, the graveyard of their ambitions, a warning about the cost of embracing darkness, and a testament to the terrible power that flows through the Force when wielded without restraint or compassion. This has been the entire history of Korriban, from its origins as a harsh world inhabited by a red-skinned species, through 30,000 years of civilization rising and falling, to its final state as an abandoned tomb world where the past sleeps but does not die. If you enjoyed this deep dive into Sith history, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. There are countless more stories to tell about the dark side, about the Sith Lords who shaped galactic history, about the battles and betrayals that defined eras. The Force contains infinite depths to explore, and this channel will continue illuminating the shadows where the Sith walked. May the Force be with you, always.